بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم
اللہ اکبر اللہ اکبر اللہ اکبر اللہ اکبر اشہد ان لا الہ الا اللہ اشہد ان لا الہ الا اللہ اشہد ان محمد رسول اللہ اشہد ان محمد رسول اللہ حی علی الصلاۃ حی علی الصلاۃ حی علی الفلاح حی علی الفلاح اللہ اکبر اللہ اکبر لا الہ الا اللہ
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The first reading is from chapter 2 Al-Baqarah, verse 164. Inna fi khalqi samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahari wal fulki allati tajri fil bahri bima yanfa'un nasa وما أنزل الله من السماء من ماء فأحيا به الأرض بعد موتها وبث فيها من كل دابة وتصريف الرياح والسحاب المسخر بين السماء والأرض لآيات لقوم يعقلون. In the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alteration and the alternation of night and day, and the ships that run in the sea, with that which benefits mankind, and the water that Allah sends down from the skies, then gives life with it to the earth after its death, and it spreads in it all kinds of animals, and the changing of the winds and the clouds made subservient between heavens and earth. There are surely signs for a people who understand. The next one is from chapter 38, and it's verse 27. وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنَ النَّارِ. And we did not create the heavens and the earth and all that is between them in vain. That is the opinion of those who disbelieve. So woe to those who disbelieve on account of the fire. These days, likely for the last century or so, a debate has been going on between scientists and rationalists about existence of God. And they say that we need empirical evidence, reason, or observable phenomena that supports this claim. Why can't we see God? And it is claimed that there is not enough scientific evidence to prove God's existence because we can't see him or hear him. In other words, there is no measurable date by which to, there is no measurable data by which to measure God. And they say that for something to exist, we must be able to sense it with our senses. But for something to exist, we don't have to be able to sense it with one of our five senses. For a start, you need appropriate equipment and measures with which to measure something. If you want to weigh something and you don't have a weighing machine, would you use a ruler to weigh it? No, you wouldn't, because a ruler is not the right equipment. It's not the right measure for what you're trying to do. And you can also look at it another way, because it applies to our senses. Can you hear a smell? You can't. Can you smell a color? You can't. And just because you can't hear or smell something, it doesn't mean to say that it doesn't exist. In the same way, just because you can see and hear something. Actually, before that, let me say something else. Can we see China? How many of us have seen China? I haven't seen it. People sitting here haven't seen it, I don't think. But we still believe China exists. Why? And you will say, oh, well, you see, we see it in books and on television and in films and so on. That tells us that China exists. Now, right, okay. But then these films, we have Ben-Hur, in which Jesus appeared. We saw him, we heard him, we saw him being put on the cross, we saw the crown of thorns being placed on his head. But do we believe that that was Jesus?
No.
Our senses are telling us he's there. We saw him, we heard him, and yet we still don't believe that that was Jesus Christ, the prophet of God. What about Star Trek? Do we believe that there's a Starship Enterprise that has gone into space looking for planets and so on? And yet we see it, we hear it, etc. And just because we see or hear something, it doesn't mean to say that it actually exists. Let's take another example. Gravity can't be seen. But would you say that it existed before Newton leapt up from under the apple tree and shouted gravity? Weren't things falling to ground before Newton shouted gravity? And we see something else happening and say, if this can only happen, if, for example, Earth was pulling it. We can't see gravity, we can't hear gravity, but we hold something up and we let go and it falls. And we say, the Earth must be pulling it. But then, this copy of the Holy Quran is being pulled by this timer that I have. But the pull is so small that the Holy Quran doesn't move. But yet the physicist will still believe that that force exists. F equals G m1 m2 over r squared will give me the amount of force that holy copy of the Holy Quran is exercising on that time. But I can't see it, I can't sense it, I can't hear it. Should I reject it because my senses cannot see them? The same with electrons and protons and neutrons. Who has seen an electron? Who has seen a proton? No one. And if you're saying, empirical evidence tells us, but you haven't seen those things. Originally, we had the plum pudding model of the atom, where atom was a solid like this, and electrons were like plums stuck on the surface of a plum pudding. Until Rutherford said, well, no, that's not the case. And he said, an atom's structure resembles our solar system, for example, with a central nucleus and electrons going around it. And we believe that. And we haven't seen it, we haven't heard it, we haven't sensed it. And we say, this could only happen if. Well, I say to you, this universe could only come into being if there was a creator who created it. How is that any different from you saying, this structure of these effects are explained by this structure of atom? See, the Holy Quran tells us to study science, to study the whole of the world, universe around us, because its design will show that there is a creator and it didn't come into being by existence. And why is this? Because the Holy Quran says that if you study it, you'll find there's no anomaly in creation. In chapter 67, verse 4. And according to this verse, science actually proves the existence of God. It tells us, science tells us the universe began with the Big Bang, or with the Big Bang. But the question is, what was it that exploded? For a bang to take place like a bomb, something must have exploded. The question then arises, where did it come from? The material that exploded, where did it come from? If there is no God who created it and set in motion the rules and regulations and scientific laws which eventually led to the creation of this universe. My grandson is fond of Lego. He sees advertisements on television. Can I have this? Can I have that? And he buys these things. And they're delivered and they sit in a box. Unless he chooses to open that box and make something out of it. I have never seen one box of Lego open itself and suddenly assemble itself into a car or a house. And yet, apparently it's completely sensible to believe that a complex structure of the universe and living organisms could spontaneously come into being without any direction or rules or regulations and so on. Why and how did this system of creation and the genes being assembled and DNA and etc., is it all accidental? If that is accidental, why don't you believe the fact that I went downstairs and the Lego box opened itself and assembled itself into a house? That is more likely than the accidental sort of transformation of various cells into humans and animals and plants and all that kind of thing. The whole of the universe is designed along certain laws and principles. Laws and principles do not come into effect accidentally. Do you think it's an accident that when cars were invented, the government made laws about how cars will be driven? The first law that was made about using the car in a city was this, that a man with a flag had to walk in front of the car to warn people that a motor car was coming. Because most carriages were pulled by horses, and horses will get scared when they saw a car or the car blew its horn. And then the government kept on changing the laws to fit in with development. But the difference is that God actually created the law that was going to take inanimate objects and turn them into living things. Not just one living thing, but many different living things. Fish in the sea, birds in the sky, animals in the forest, human beings, flowers, fruits, vegetables. They're all living things. And yet they're all different. A simple example. If someone has an accident and they run and they bleed and run short of blood, If you just take the next person and take a bottle of blood from him and give it to that person, what will happen? More likely than not, the person who receives the blood will die. Because you have to give the same type of blood. So even the blood running in our veins has a different structure. And we talk about O negative and AB and all this kind of thing. And yet we are told that it all happened randomly. There was no creator who set up laws that led to the creation of the universe and everything that is in it. And I find it very difficult. I find it very difficult to believe that there's no creator and it all happened accidentally. And that is perfectly sensible and rational. But to say that if a Lego set can't spring into action and turn itself into a house, the universe must have needed a guiding hand that set up the material, that set up the rules and laws and regulations, which caused this to come into creation. And that is laughter. That is silly. But I would suggest that saying there is no God is silly rather than saying there is a God. We'll continue with this topic next week, inshallah. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم إنه تعالى جواد كريم ملك رؤوف رحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. اللہ اکبر اللہ اکبر، اشہد ان لا الہ الا اللہ، اشہد ان محمد رسول اللہ، حی علی الصلاۃ حی علی الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاۃ قد قامت الصلاۃ، اللہ اکبر لا الہ الا اللہ، اللہ اکبر۔ الحمد للہ رب العالمین، الرحمن الرحیم، مالک یوم الدین، ایاک نعبد و ایاک نستعین، اہدنا الصراط المستقیم، صراط الذین انعمت علیہم غیر المغضوب علیہم ولا الضالین، آمین۔ الہاکم التکاثر حتی زرتم المقابر، حتی زرتم المقابر، کلا سوف تعلمون ثم کلا سوف تعلمون، کلا لو تعلمون علم الیقین لترون الجحیم، ثم لترونها عین الیقین، ثم لتسألن یومئذ عن النعیم، اللہ اکبر۔ سمع اللہ لمن حمدہ، اللہ اکبر۔ اللہ اکبر، اللہ اکبر، اللہ اکبر۔ الحمد للہ رب العالمین، الرحمن الرحیم، مالک یوم الدین، ایاک نعبد و ایاک نستعین، اہدنا الصراط المستقیم، صراط الذین انعمت علیہم غیر المغضوب علیہم ولا الضالین، آمین۔ والعصر ان الانسان لفی خسر، وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر، اللہ اکبر۔ سمع اللہ لمن حمدہ، اللہ اکبر۔ اللہ اکبر، اللہ اکبر۔ Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah. Salam alaikum. Salam. I just realized I missed out one verse when reciting in the second rakah. So we'll say two sajdas of error. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My apologies while reciting in the second rakah. I missed out one verse, skipped one verse. I request people to actually, if I do this, to actually shout out the verse that I missed out. But God is forgiving and merciful as opposed to human beings, so I'm sure He'll forgive me. With a request to pray for the whole humanity, especially for the Ummah and the trials it's going through, that Allah may keep everyone safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.